John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com is with us here. John, did you look into any more of this little back and forth here? Because this was a week ago that Lurie said these things, right? And it didn't seem like he said something that was gaining national. And was this based on the question that you asked Lurie, by the way?
Yeah. Yes. And the Eagles are not happy.
With you or King?
Probably with both of us, but more so with Sean King. And his claims are entirely inaccurate and unfair. Really seems to have come from Marcus Hayes' column, if you guys saw that. Sort of read that, didn't do the research into what actually Jeffrey Lurie said, which is why the Eagles tweeted back the transcript unedited. Never claimed he would not hire Colin Kaepernick. At one point, I was there. I asked the question. I asked one of the questions that are germane to this. Never at one time did he say anything of that nature, but you have this hot-button issue, and people refuse to put context into it. And you're seeing this right now where he basically called the Eagles owner a racist. And I've written a lot about this both nationally and on our website at 973ESPN.com. There are a lot of owners in this league that are very, very progressive in a political sense, liberal, whatever term you want to use. Jeffrey Lurie is in that category. And the fact that he employs Malcolm Jenkins, and not only employs him, but encourages him for his own social activism, kind of highlights that. But again, you're talking about a guy trying to inflame people and not doing any research whatsoever. I understand why the Eagles are upset, but this is, and they're not looking for my advice. They're probably angry that I asked the question. But if I was giving them advice, I would say just let the guy, bury himself, because it's ill-informed. He's misquoting, and he didn't even take time out to read the transcript.
Right. See, that's where, he essentially is what you're saying, that he did not take the transcript from the Eagles and use those direct quotes. He essentially kind of came up with his own. Is that what he kind of did here? He paraphrased, I guess?
Yeah, essentially he's paraphrasing, and he's claiming that Jeffrey Lurie, and he went back to Riley Cooper, who obviously was caught on video with a racial slur, and the Eagles fined him but continued to employ him. He's trying to compare that situation with the fact that Jeffrey Lurie won't hire Colin Kaepernick because of his social activism. Jeffrey Lurie said nothing of that in that press conference. The Eagles have no interest in Colin Kaepernick, but he did not say, I'm not hiring him because he kneeled during the national anthem. It's absurd. You have Malcolm Jenkins, as I said, who consistently puts up a fist during the national anthem as his own protest. Jeffrey has no problem with it whatsoever. What he tried to explain is his thought process. He said he has no problem with people protesting things of this nature. He would just prefer if they backed it up with action, as Malcolm does, whether it's speaking in front of Congress or doing other things in the community. That's basically the context of what Jeffrey tried to get across. And it was completely taken out of context. And I understand. Look, nobody wants to be called a racist. And I'm sure Jeffrey's very upset by it. The Eagles organization is upset by it. And they're trying
Well, for the Eagles organization to directly, I know Twitter sounds like, but that's kind of the way people communicate. But their official Twitter account directly tweeted to this writer. I don't know what Sean's background is. I have heard of him. I know he's gotten himself into very many of these types of, activism, conversations. But for them to directly put that out there shows that they are upset and angry.
Yeah, and they should be, and I understand it, but you can't win in these types of situations, and that's why I said you're better off just. I understand they wanted to tweet out the transcript. Now that it's out there, you just point to that and say, "Here's what Jeffrey Lurie said. Your allegations are completely unfounded. They're ill-informed." And again, let him bury himself, because he's going to continue down this path. And he obviously knows nothing about Jeffrey Lurie. He did no history, did no look into the background of Jeffrey Lurie, because, again, if you know his politics at all, if you picked up the phone, if you've ever spoken to him, you know these allegations aren't true, but there's certain people that are always going to look things. I always say it's ironic in questions of race that people look at things black and white, because there is context to them, and they refuse to acknowledge that. And I'll take, this is the same guy who asked people to boycott the NFL because of their treatment of Colin Kaepernick last week. And if you think about the absurdity of that, if you're trying to advance African-American causes, 70+% of this league is African-American. So why are you trying to boycott what so many African-Americans use as the way to make a living? To me, it makes no sense.
Yeah, and again, it's odd. I guess when did Marcus write his piece? Because I didn't see Marcus's piece, but this press conference was over a week ago.
Yeah, Marcus wrote his piece earlier this week, and it was basically, I would say, more of a defense of Jeffrey Lurie more than anything else. But you could kind of tell. Because the context also wasn't in that piece of what Jeffrey was saying, and it was sort of built around the fact that he's not going to hire him, and he never said that. So people kind of trying to figure out where Sean King is getting his information are pointing to that column. So I believe that's where it's at, but he certainly didn't contact the Eagles for a comment or a transcript or anything of that nature. And they certainly didn't contact me or Tim McManus or Martin Frank, which were the three reporters that asked questions about Colin Kaepernick.
All right, John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Let's take a look at some of the news and notes for the week. And you wrote about this earlier today. Eagles, Chiefs, Douglas for Darby, not so fast. What's the feeling you're getting for a replacement for Ronald Darby in the secondary? It might not be their third-round pick.
No, I think he's going to be active and he's going to be up, and there's a potential that he could play. But I think the Eagles liked what happened in the second half against Washington, and that's when they moved Jalen Watkins outside and put Patrick Robinson back in the slot. I think that's the way they're going to go. Jim Schwartz is very big on not giving up, obviously, strategy, as most coaches, and he's got his players on lockdown for the most part, so they're not going to tell you either. But if you just look at the Chiefs and what they bring to the table, and the fact that Tyreek Hill is liable to be in the slot quite a bit, and, even you would be amazed, even in a league filled with fast people, everyone recognizes just how fast Tyreek Hill is. So the last thing you want is Malcolm Jenkins on him in the slot. You need a cornerback. So I have to believe Patrick Robinson's going to stay in the slot, and they're going to try to make do with Jalen Watkins at first. And if he doesn't perform, then you might see Rasul Douglas get a chance. But I don't think it's going to start that way.
John, the Eagles already showed us they didn't think very highly of this group of cornerbacks. How concerned are they now with this group moving forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends how you frame that. They were not high on this group before they got Ronald Darby and Dexter McDougal. I think they're much more comfortable now, but obviously Darby's not going to be able to go for 4 to 6 weeks. And you have a guy who, there's a reason they made 2 trades. And the reason, basically, they made 2 trades was the fact that they didn't think Rasul Douglas was ready to play. And now, all of a sudden, here we are in week 2 because of injuries. He might have to play. So they're going to say they're not concerned, but they're very concerned. And certainly when you're looking at the other side, and you have Tyreek Hill, and you have also Travis Kelce, who's a tight end, but let's face it, he's a glorified slot receiver, a guy who's detached a lot.
Hey, John, obviously they took Douglas in the 3rd round. They had high hopes for him. Would you say that he has been somewhat of a major disappointment, that not only do they think he's not ready, but a guy gets hurt and they still can't turn to him?
No, I don't. I don't think those two things. I say this every year around this league. Everybody's so excited in April when they draft their class and they bring them in and they say this guy's this and everybody's great. And I say the same thing about sort of the explosion of the armchair scouts you see all over who watch film, and they tell you every college player is great. And then they get to training camp and they put the pads on and coaches start to say, well, okay, this guy's not ready. And we got to go in a different direction. But that doesn't mean they're not going to develop into players down the line. I think the Eagles have a lot of confidence in the fact that Rasul Douglas is eventually going to be a big part of this defense. He's just not ready to play week 1 of his rookie year as a 3rd-round pick. He's hardly an anomaly. The anomaly was expecting big things out of a rookie 3rd-round pick. And, the Eagles had to say that in the spring because they had nothing else. But evident by their actions and the trades, they understood they needed to improve. He wasn't ready. But that's what this league is about in a lot of ways. Everybody suffers injury. Kansas City's got one in their own secondary with Eric Berry. You got to find a way to muddle through. And whether it's Jalen Watkins or Rasul Douglas or moving Patrick Robinson, they have to figure out something, as they did when Darby went down last week.
John McMullen with us, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider, national columnist for FanRagSports.com. So, yes, Ronald Darby goes down last week. They sort of mix and match, John, and find a way to get through the game. But a big reason the Eagles were able to win the game was the push of that front 4. How do you think the Eagles' front 4 or their defensive front matches up against the Chiefs' offensive line this week?
Well, I think it matches up very good. I think for the most part we're going to be able to say that just about every week this year because the Eagles' front is really good. They have a top 5 defensive line in this league. And I would argue Washington probably has a better offensive line than Kansas City. So that's not one of the strengths really of the Chiefs, their offensive line. So I think that part of it, the Eagles are going to feel very good about. And Jim Schwartz will tell you all the time the engine that runs his defense is that front 4. So they obviously need a big effort from them this week. Now, what becomes an issue, especially in Kansas City, because that's one of the more difficult places to play because of the noise, one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL, that makes it more difficult. And we'll see how it shakes out. But from a personnel standpoint, the Eagles have the edge when it's their defensive line against the Chiefs' offensive line.
John, also, when you look around, the weapons, Hill, we saw what Hunt did, Kelce, as you kind of mentioned, is Jim Schwartz going to have to change? Obviously, you change from week to week, but can he blitz a lot this week? Is that the recipe against this Kansas City offense, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he will blitz as much this week for a couple
specifically,
of reasons.
With the change in the secondary, too.
Yeah, you have the change in the secondary. As I just mentioned, I don't think Kansas City's offensive line is as good as Washington, so that plays into it as well. And then you have the big hit ability of Tyreek Hill, who might be the biggest home run hitter in this league. You know, it's amazing. Even Torrey Smith, who I joke, when Ronald Darby came here, and Ronald runs a 4.3 40, you know, Torrey won't admit anyone's faster than him. Just won't admit it. And today he talked about Tyreek Hill, and he said he's fast. Everybody in a league filled with fast people recognizes Tyreek Hill is on a different level. And he's tough to deal with. He really is. And, you know, Patrick Robinson spoke today, and he said, you've got to get your hands on him. You know, Malcolm Jenkins, everybody just talked about how explosive and how fast he is. And it's interesting because Andy had such success here with Deshaun Jackson. It's kind of reborn out in Kansas City with Tyreek Hill.
I had talked about this a little bit yesterday. Daniel Sorensen is going to be the guy replacing Eric Berry, and Berry means a lot to them. Sorensen, while Jim Schwartz spoke highly of him, and he will be the guy that takes that spot, is he a guy that the Eagles can maybe try to go right after?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's an advantage if Eric Berry's not there. I don't know. Safeties aren't the same as cornerbacks, so it's tough to really target them because a lot depends on a coverage on a particular play. Who knows? Kansas City might play a lot of cover 2, cover 3, and it becomes more of sort of a team environment on the back end. When you're talking about zone coverage. So I'm not sure you really go out of your way to say, we're going to attack Daniel Sorensen. And everybody's actually spoken very highly of him. Frank Reich did, Torrey Smith did today. But, yeah, he's not Eric Berry. And I imagine at times you'll be able to scheme maybe him in man-to-man coverage on Zach Ertz or something of that nature. But I don't know if that could be a big part of your game plan.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com with us. And, of course, the Eagles taking on the Chiefs. How about Jason Peters? You know, we talked a little bit about him yesterday, but Jason Peters seemingly okay, ready to go, and seems like he's going to be all right? Or is there a legitimate concern? Because they did make that move earlier in the week with the practice squad. And I guess the follow-up to that would be, if Peters went down again, would they do the same thing with Big V at the left tackle spot, or would you think that we'll see Lane Johnson maybe be that guy that moves over? Because Big V seemed like he struggled a little bit, and you know, this Kansas City defense comes at you from a bunch of different angles.
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think if it happens on game day, and Jason practiced again fully for the second straight day, so he's going to play. But you always have to be concerned because of his age and nagging injuries. If he does go out on game day, they will play Vaitai at left tackle because Jeff Stoutland has told me again and again he doesn't want to put Lane Johnson over at left tackle unless he's got some reps during the week, unless he's prepared for it to get his footwork down. So if Peters is out for the week and they know he's not going to play, I think then you see them move Lane Johnson over to left tackle and let Vaitai play right tackle. But if he comes out in the middle of a game, you're going to see Vaitai at left tackle, and let's be honest, that's not good.
Nope. As you tweeted today, Jason Peters looked like a full go. So let's quickly get into some NFL quick news and notes for tonight. Houston, Deshaun Watson, does it appear that he will be the guy?
Yeah, he's going to start. Today's his 22nd birthday, I believe. So his first NFL start is going to come on his 22nd birthday. I can't imagine. Thursday night games tend to be ugly. We always talk about. I can't imagine this not being an ugly one. Two of the worst offensive lines in the league. You have Houston giving up 10 sacks last week. Cincinnati was awful. They've lost 3 starters, awful against Baltimore on the offensive line. And then you have Houston doesn't have any tight ends. All their tight ends have concussions. It's really going to be an ugly game. I would expect Cincinnati just because they're in better position as far as health-wise and coming off such an awful performance. I would imagine that they have an advantage. But, boy, it's been a bad week and a half for the Houston Texans.
Sure has. One quarterback change already. Are we going to get another one in Indianapolis?
I would hope so for the Indianapolis fans. I mean, obviously, it kind of doesn't matter for that team until they get Andrew Luck back. They're just going to be really, really bad. But you saw Scott Tolzien. He's just not an NFL-capable quarterback. 2 pick-sixes against the Los Angeles Rams, and they just got ran out of the building. And let's face it, the Rams aren't a very good football team themselves, and they didn't even have Aaron Donald, who's their best player. And they still destroyed him. So, they acquired Jacoby Brissett earlier this month. Obviously, he doesn't know their entire offense, but from a skill set standpoint, he can throw the football. He's got a big arm. And that's what Rob Szynski, their offensive coordinator, likes to do. And Andrew Luck's one of the best in football with the deep throw. So they like to be very vertical on offense, and Brissett just gives them a better opportunity to do that.
Speaking with reporters today, John, Odell Beckham told them that he's dealing with a 6 to 8 week injury. It's been about, 3 weeks for that injury now, or maybe 4 weeks for the injury now for Beckham. So what's the latest on Beckham's status for Monday night?
Well, he claims he's feeling good, so he gave sort of, conflicting signals about how long it should take and if he's able to get out there. But similar to what we just talked about with Luck, I mean, he is the New York Giants offense. They got a bad quarterback, a bad offensive line, a bad running game, and Odell Beckham Jr. And when he's out there, obviously, that increases the potential of Brandon Marshall and Sterling Shepard. Without him, you saw against Dallas, they just have nothing offensively. So it's going to be really, really difficult for that team. And I think he's going to try to push back as quickly as possible. So I still think he's got a chance to play. And it could be one of those, I always joke, if you ever watched Emmitt Smith play, he would always leave the game limping. He looked like he was shot, and then he'd come back 2 plays later and look like the Hall of Fame Emmitt Smith. Maybe Odell's trying to do that.
All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. There's your NFL news and notes with John McMullen. Don't forget, at JF McMullen. Follow him there on Twitter. And, of course, check him out at 97.3ESPN.com. More. And John's pick is up right now for Eagles Chiefs at 97.3ESPN.com. Thanks, John.
Hey, thank you, guys.